Today we are talking about iridology, fact and fiction, myths and fables. And so this is a really important thing for us to be aware of because there is so much information out there that that is maybe incorrect. I mean, that's how science goes, right? That we know one thing and we treat it as absolutely fact and it's true because it's the best we know, but a little later on as the science develops, we learn something new. And sometimes that first thing that we knew is hard to let go of. And that's what we find with iridology, is that it's often hard for people to let go of things that they learned, whether they think it's being disloyal to their teacher or whatever. But it's just really important that we keep current with the most recent information. So important. So for those of you who might be new to me, and I'm just going to pop this around one more time. For those of you who might be new to me, my name is Judith Cobb. I'm a master herbalist, natural nutrition, clinical practitioner, certified iridologist, and a certified comprehensive iridology instructor. I've been in the industry for 40 years. I've been doing iridology in one way or another for 40 years. I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen a lot of development. I've seen a lot of science. And I've seen a lot of old stuff get hung onto like with a death grip, like there's nothing better than that. And it's like, oh my goodness, there is so much better than that. So today we are going to be looking at what some of those myths are. What are some of the things that just won't go away in spite of the fact that they have been proven to be incorrect? So I would love it as we're going through if you would make comments, share comments with me on the chat box and in the comments box so that I can understand where you're coming from. And so that if you've got questions, I can answer them as we go. So we're going to pop the camera phone around so you can actually see the screen. And for those of you on Instagram, I will move the camera closer to the screen when we're looking at things that you need to see details of. Okay, so again, go ahead and post questions and comments as we go. This is the very first myth that we need to bust, and this is the story. So have you heard the owl story? Have you? All right, so as we look at this, this goes back to the 1800s with a young boy named Ignaz van Petzl. The story says he was 11 years old. That is about the only thing we know for absolute sure, because the stories that I've heard over the 40 years was an owl, it was a hawk. I don't know which it was, I wasn't there. Ignaz found this bird with a broken arm or a broken wing or a broken leg, or he was trying to catch the bird and broke its wing or its leg in the process, or something like that. He apparently saw some kind of a black line develop in the bird's iris, and as the bird healed, this line went away. Now, I'm not sure which of those stories is correct. I do know that I don't think the story is accurate, and I'm going to share with you some reasons why. First off, Bill Caradonna, who is one of the people who brought constitutional iridology to light in North America, said modern iridology can't explain the owl story. Van Petzl's story from a very long time ago has not been reproduced. We're going to talk about that. So it's just a waste of time to repeat it. It just creates confusion. Critical thinking is required when applied to any topic. Now, when we look at this, if it was, we've got two things here. Number one, an animal iris front layer, anterior border layer is very different from a human one, very different. And you will see that when you look very closely at pictures of animal eyes, they do not have the same type of stroma, the same type of fiber structure. That's the first thing. Number two, there are lots of animal rescue facilities, and there's veterinarians all over the world, right? Don't you think that in all of those cases, that if a bird was brought in with a broken wing or a broken leg, that some veterinarian or some vet tech would have seen that kind of a line in that bird's eye? I mean, there are hawk and eagle and other bird rescue facilities, right? And so wouldn't we have seen that? Wouldn't they have commented on that? Wouldn't it be documented somewhere? So this is one important thing for us to remember, that just because it's in the history books doesn't mean it's necessarily true when it comes to iridology. Bill Caradonna says, if you look at a picture of an owl's eye or most any animal, the structure of the iris is different from humans. There is no anterior stroma, just as I said, just a smooth posterior leaf without individual strands of fiber. So it is structurally impossible to have such an event. Interesting. Now, having said that, I'm going to say also that I'm certainly not slapping Ignaz van Petzschle down. Absolutely not, because whatever he saw, whatever he thought he saw, led him to continue to study iridology, to actually be one of the first researchers in the field, and led him to begin diagramming out, I can't imagine the labor that it took, diagramming out a map of the iris for humans, where he would examine the eye with a 2-power microscope. He would draw diagrams of those eyes and then began studying and asking, well, if these people have these symptoms and they have this marking, does that all correlate to this body part, this organ? So the research that it led him to do is nothing short of amazing. What it was that actually stimulated him to do it, we'll never know. We'll never know. So another myth, so this is the second myth, and this is one that says that we can use iris photos to monitor changes in your health and changes in your irides. And I want to suggest to you that one of the things we need to watch for here is the fact that irides can change, but they don't change fast enough to monitor any changes in a matter of a few weeks or a few months. So going on a deep, intense cleanse or a fast is not going to pop up changes really quickly in the irides. And the types of changes that we see are not the types of changes that most people are talking about. The changes that most people are talking about actually are based more on the technology used than actual changes in the eye. So the first thing we want to note here is that, for example, these images are the same eye, taken about 23 years apart. These images used different technology. This was a print film camera, a professional a single SLR, single lens reflex camera. This is a digital camera, a digital SLR, and you can see here that even the colors are a bit different. And that is because the light source is different. And it's because every piece of tech that you own will display color differently. That's just how it goes. So when we look at these, what you will notice is that over these 23 years, look right down in here, there's nothing. Look right in here, now there's something. Okay, so what we know is pigment accumulates, pigment does not disperse. So again, we need to account, some people would look at this photo and then they would look at this and they'd go, oh my, look at the cleansing, look at the difference in size of these markings in here. They're so much smaller over here. But we need to consider the tech that was used, right? This was not as bright of an image, or the adrenal glands were not as tired perhaps. And so the pupil is larger. That's going to alter how the color appears slightly because this tissue is condensed into a smaller area. That's going to alter the appearance of color. The fact that the pupil is smaller here stretches the fibers out, stretches out the trabeculae, and will make these markings appear narrower. They aren't actually smaller. It's just that the fibers have been pulled straighter. Think of these fibers as almost being like a balloon that you can make animal shapes out of. So you know that you can squeeze that balloon in places to make it get fatter on one end, and then, you know, tie it and bend it and do whatever. And it's not that the balloon has changed its actual volume. It's simply that there's been pressure put on different ways. And here, the pressure is simply the pupil is smaller, that stretches the fibers out, that makes things look narrower. Okay, we also want to look at these other pigments in this eye. And you know, if you're looking at this and you're going, wow, those are bright orange. Oh, look at, they're much paler here. Again, we need to consider the lighting source, the color quality of the light, and the fact that this area is stretched out a little bit more, which is going to disperse the pigment or spread it out over a slightly larger area. So we've got so many tech things going on because of the difference in camera and lighting that we cannot use iris photos done in this way as a comparison. The only way you can make any kind of a comparison or use photos to truly compare anything is if it's the exact same camera on the exact same settings with the exact same light. So to that end, you need to understand your f-stops, your shutter speeds. You need to know how to control the light on your camera and how to monitor that from image to image so that you're getting the exact same light settings. Battery power. If your batteries are a little bit tired in your camera, that's also going to have an impact on your image. So it's really important for us to remember that differences that we see in the iris are usually tech. There are a few minor exceptions to that. Now, where we want to pay attention to, because modern iridologists do this, is we want to look at the sclera. We want to look at the white of the eye. So when we look at the white of the eye, particularly in this upper corner and in this upper corner, what we actually see is there has been some improvement. Where the iris is genetic, the iris is what's been passed down over 3 or 4 generations. It teaches us what this body's potentials are. The sclera shows us what is current, what is dynamic, where are the current issues. So age 42, we see this very thick blood vessel up here, which suggests a particular kind of congestion that we want to be aware of. But look, at the age of 65, that congestion is almost gone. That blood vessel is much narrower. But what we do have is, look in this, see this, it looks like a Harry Potter scarf, you know Harry Potter. So we've got this blood vessel up here that is a little bit lightish, but now at the age of 65, it's much brighter and it's got what we call a pearl or a pool in it. And so that tells us there's been some other things going on with congestion in an organ that we maybe need to be paying attention to dynamically. So we've got the 2 facets here of the iris is inherent and the sclera is what's going on right now, but we cannot use photography to monitor changes unless we are using the exact same tech and unless we know exactly that everything is parallel, right? And then if there's a change, then we can trace it back. Hello, Prana, nice of you to join us on Instagram. Thanks for being there. All right, so what we know as well is that healing lines is another myth. This is one that I was taught early on when I started my iridology practice, was that if a part of the body was healing, we were going to see extra trabeculae or extra fibers magically appear. So this is an interesting study. This is my eye from last year, my eyes from last year. And because last year was a very interesting year. If you think 2020 has been bad, 2019 was right up there with 2020. Last year, I broke my arm in March, broke 2 bones in my forearm, had to have surgery to repair them both. And then on May 12th, on Mother's Day, I broke my elbow of the same arm and ended up in surgery with, again, more implants, more metal being implanted. So here's my eye from 2017. I'm just like that. I like to take pictures of my eye periodically just to see if there are changes. And so then, and what we're looking at here in this left iris is we're specifically looking in the arm zone. So I want you to look right in here where this arrow is pointing. This is 2 years before the break, before the first break. So here we are, March 2019. This is about a week after the first break. It's exactly the same. There is no change. Breaks do not show up in the eye. Now remember, this actually had a double surgery because of where the bones were, 2 incisions, 2 metal plates, 12 screws in total put in there to hold my wrist together. And then in May, again, like I said, I broke my elbow. So fell on the ice in March, slipped on some stairs and landed at the bottom of the stairs on my elbow. Again, broke the olecranon off. It now has wires and screws holding it together. Well, probably not holding it together anymore, but they're still in there. And there's absolutely no change. So then in August, no more breaks, just saying. But I thought, I wonder, May, June, July, August, a couple, 2.5 months later, anything? And there are still no healing lines. And so this is one case that dispels the idea of healing lines. The iris itself is made up of layers of fiber, layers of fiber. And so when we see what we used to call healing lines, they aren't healing lines. We're actually looking at fiber that is down a layer or down 2 layers in the iris, and they're supposed to be there. It's supposed to be there. So now, having said all this, my arm has healed beautifully. My physiotherapist is very impressed that I have pretty much 100% extension and flexion on it. I'm still working on strength. That'll take a while. Okay, so you'll see a lot of people online saying that things like this mean that this person has too much sulfur, has used a lot of antibiotics in their lifetime. And I'm here to tell you again, this is my husband's eye. We've looked at it a moment ago, taken at the age of 42. He had 1 round of antibiotics in his lifetime. That's it, 1 round. Not repeated rounds, 1 round when he developed pneumonia. And I'm trying to remember, it would have actually been just after these pictures were taken, so he hadn't had antibiotics yet ever in his lifetime. And so when we come to this other eye again, we go, oh, he's cleansed, he's cleansed. No, he didn't cleanse. You can't cleanse this out. This isn't toxins. The color of the pigment tells us which organ inherently, genetically is prone to stress. And the placement of the pigment tells us which organ is likely bearing the brunt of that stress, which organ has to deal with the fallout. And there's often more than 1 organ. Now, Prana says, will you be posting this? I will. This is actually going into IGTV, so it will be there for you, Prana. What you see here is, again, as we mentioned earlier, pigment accumulates, it does not disperse. Harry Wolff, who was the other gentleman who was responsible for bringing constitutional iridology to the forefront in North America, said, in fact, it's bogus and a dogma that, only found among some holdouts from the Lindlar, Kreitzer, and Jensen schools of thought. The notion that certain metals, minerals, toxins routinely show up as diagnostic indicators in the iris has long been refuted and proven unreliable. There is no evidence to support the notion that heavy metal toxicity is measurable in the iris, likewise drugs and candida. Again, this is telling us that this gentleman's issues lie primarily in kidneys and possibly in pancreas. And if you know your anatomy and physiology, and we still see those here, remember what we talked about with technology and how it can wash out or make pigment look less. Different cameras, again, just keep that in mind. So with this gentleman, then we need to watch his kidney function. You have to know all the things kidneys do, and his blood sugar balance. And his blood sugars are something we work with constantly because there is type 1 diabetes in his family, and we need to, just guard him and to make sure that his nutrition is sound. Another myth, I can see a parasite in your brain. So there are many people who will say that these black lines tell you have parasites right now. Remember, the iris teaches us about the genetic capabilities of the body, both strengths and weaknesses. It teaches us what was inherited. It teaches us things that the genetics, that your genes know. It does not teach us things that don't affect the genes. So when we see these, we need to remember that if the parasite actually changes your genetic structure, it's going to show up. I don't know of a parasite that does that. Since parasites do not change your genetic structure, this has nothing to do with parasites. They're not going to show up in the eyes. Again, Harry Wolff said American sources from the turn of the 20th century are very unreliable, repetitive, and very misleading, with silly and debunked notions like drug spots, psoriatic itch spots, healing lines, parasite lines, and brown eyes turn blue with detox. Right? And so we just need to be aware that these black lines teach us different things about the person, but they do not teach us that the person has parasites. So, so important. Another myth, that you can diagnose disease from the eyes. You have health condition X, Y, Z. Here's the deal. Only licensed medical practitioners are legally allowed to diagnose, and iridologists, even if we are naturopaths or medical doctors, do not diagnose from the iris. It is something we do not do. So I studied Jensenian iridology way back when the earth was young and grass was green in the early 1980s. And I was taught with that style of iridology that I could diagnose, that I could tell people what was wrong with them. And I did that a lot. I would see things in their eyes and I go, your eyes say you've got this, this, and this. And the client would go, no, I don't, no, I don't, no, I don't. And that was very frustrating, because it meant that I was usually wrong. Fast forward, after I learned constitutional iridology in the early 1990s, I found that I was right a whole lot more often for a couple of reasons. Not that I was telling people what was wrong with them, but I was now looking at indicators. I was combining indicators to gain a deeper understanding of the body. And rather than telling them what was wrong, I was now asking them if they or a family member had a particular symptom. And now I was right 95% of the time, which is a real nice thing to feel. Bill Caradonis said iridology cannot be used to diagnose. It is a unique assessment tool to gain understanding of the blueprint of the body, including tendencies towards illness patterns or assessment of resiliency and resistance against negative influences. But diagnosing the presence or status of illness or disease is never appropriate. So that's a huge myth. And I see this out there all the time with people who are iridologists, allowing other people to post poor quality iris photos on social media sites. And then the iridologist tells them what's wrong. You know, and it's crazy that from a couple of perspectives, and this is all just, you know, my opinion, but you don't know what the credentials are of the person who's giving you that information. And there's no conversation between the practitioner and the client, quote unquote client in this case. And so what that means is that the practitioner is simply giving a list of a one-to-one correlation of this indicator means that, this indicator means the other, this indicator means something else. And rather than putting them together and saying, well, when we see these three things together, it usually suggests a predisposition towards such and such. And then having that conversation of, is there personal or family history in that direction? Right? And so what I find is that by doing the constitutional approach, I am able to actually gather better information from my clients. I am better able to really understand not only what my clients' needs are, but the pathway we should follow and the sequence that we should follow in order to guide the client through the process of regaining their health. I don't care that the eyes don't change. I care that my client's health improves. I care that I'm able to develop programs quickly and easily that my clients can actually stick with, rather than overwhelming them with a long detailed list of every marker I see in the eye, everything that could possibly mean, and every little detail of things that they should be doing. Because when you do that, you just simply overwhelm your client and they won't stick to it. And because they don't stick to it, they don't get results. Is that making sense? So I'd love to see if there's any questions as we're rolling forward here. So for the past several years, I've been teaching wellness practitioners like you the art and science of constitutional iridology. And registration for the next section of the class is open now. And I'd love to share a few details with you about that if you would allow me to, just like 2 minutes. It's not going to be long. Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. That's one of the big concerns, is if you can do an assessment faster and more accurately and create their program more quickly, are you going to be giving your clients less? No, you're going to be giving them what they need in the moment for the next month or 6 weeks. And we do this so that we can stop working unpaid overtime, and we stop overwhelming their clients with undual programs to create programs that will create client compliance and success and long-term retention. Prana on Instagram is saying, where should I start with? Did you say Harry Wolf? I was going to take Robert Morse's Iridology course. Well, Prana, I teach a course based on what Harry Wolf taught. Harry Wolf and Bill Caradonna were my instructors. And so, Prana, I'm going to invite you, with the information I'm sharing now, to start with me. If you want to learn more than just iris markers, and if you want to learn how the markers play off each other, if you want to be mentored in creating programs for your clients, and if you want long-term support and mentoring after the course is done, join me for an info webinar on Tuesday. I'm going to post the links. I was supposed to have that prepped. I don't think I've got the right link here. I will, yeah, if you actually will private message me for that link, I will make sure you get it. Okay, because I think I've messed up there. And Prana, the other thing is Harry Wolf has retired from being an active iridologist. He does not teach anymore. He is very vocal about it, which is great, and I love it. I love his comments when I see him online, but he does not actually teach anymore. As he says, he loves it, but he's not teaching. So again, I'm inviting you to join me for a webinar on Tuesday, September 8th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So for those of you who are in a different time zone than I am, which is probably most of you, it's about 11:30 a.m. where I am, and this webinar will happen at 6 p.m. where I am on September 8th. And our next course actually starts on October 7th. In this webinar, I am going to share with you the details of the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology course, so you know what's included, what kind of support you get, how the program is delivered, what mentoring you have access to, what the tuition is, and how to register, of course. So if you are a herbalist, a nutrition coach, or a naturopath, if you've got some holistic health training, and especially if you have an understanding of anatomy and physiology, I invite you to join me for this info webinar. And that would be an excellent thing. So again, if you will just PM your address, your email address to me. I apologize that I forgot to put that link in my notes. I will gladly send you the invitation to the Tuesday evening webinar to learn more about the course. We'll also do a couple of case studies and look a little more closely at how I suggest you use iridology in your practice to actually streamline your work, but still create really deep rapport and fabulous programs that will give your clients good results. Alrighty, so I'm checking and it doesn't look like there is there's no more questions or comments coming in. Again, I invite you to PM me for the link for the Tuesday evening class, and I will make sure that you get that. All right, thank you so much for being with me today. I hope this has been informative for you. I hope it's given you a new look, a new perspective on iridology and constitutional. And the Barefoot Herbalist on Instagram is saying, I will DM you. Look forward to it, Barefoot. I will make sure you get the link. And Yeah, so that's all I have for you today. And I look forward to seeing you soon. See you hopefully Tuesday. Bye for now.